Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about agile. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that all teams love agile work practices so much? Well, honestly, I don't think that most, at least not the software developers, they don't really care so much usually. I think that for the software developers, the it's a bit strong to say that they love it. I don't say that they hate it either. I say that it's just grades of terrible for the software developers in many cases, because the thing that the software developers usually care about is to have two things in place that are pretty fundamental to their ability to work effectively. I mean, there is a category of software developer as well who is like, yes, the ones that let's just say that these are not the people that you want to want to have in your company, and these are the ones who don't give a fuck about anything, and they don't actually really care if like how anything works at all. Like they don't take the time to actually understand anything or like follow anything or so forth and so forth. But the thing that usually matters to the software developers is, one, you have a Kanban board of some sort where you can represent sort of the state of the work so that you can track what people are doing when things are in testing, when they're done, etc., etc. You don't even this is to a certain degree optional, but I've never seen at this point, after all these years of working, I've never seen a team that ran efficiently without one, because it always ends the same way, which is where, as I was saying, you're basically in a continuous state where like you're tracking work in like a thread on an email chain somewhere, or on Slack, like instant messaging or something like that. And it's, as I said, like for me, that usually ends with what I said. The reason why you're there is because you're dealing with people who don't actually give a fuck about progress or stuff like that. They just work on stuff. It doesn't really matter, right? So that's the one thing that they care about. The other thing that they care about is that the work is defined well enough so that they understand what they're supposed to be doing. These are the main things usually, and everything else is usually a complaint in some fashion. I've never been in a software team where like some teams they hate the daily stand-up, some things that it's necessary, some things we have them too much, some things they are too long, some people think that the retro, or like depending on like how like exactly what you mean by agile, some people swear by Scrum, some people hate Scrum. It's like a mishmash of different opinions about how to do effective work. And so usually what happens is that a team they pick up whatever practices are either enforced upon them by whoever's in charge, or they just make up their own as they sort of go along. Like they find something sort of, as I was saying, for the most part, you'll see that there is a Kanban board somewhere, and for the most part, you're going to see that someone writes a story specification in the card, and that's usually also something that, like, that's a lot of a source of great frustration for a lot of people as well, where writing a story card is like a one-liner saying, "Hey, do this thing," and then yeah, you don't really know what that is, and then you still have to talk about it. So, like the process of defining work and preparing work and tracking it and so forth. These are the things that most of the software developers care about. But whether or not you have like full on grooming sessions, or if you subtasks things, or you go all safe, or even the waterfall thing, is it's usually not something that like very few software developers have a positive opinion about any of that stuff, because usually it means for, well, at least the average one, that they have to go to meetings, they have to do things that are non-coding related, or they have to do things that they feel is like tedious in some fashion, or so forth and so forth. Some of them really love it, as I said. That's why it's so hard to say that it's all bad, because it's not all bad. It's, as I said, just nuances of terrible. Uh, That's why I tell people as well, you can make any system work, whether you be it agile or be it waterfall, or etc. etc. It really comes down to what parts do you pick, and do you actually understand fully what makes the difference for effective delivery of software. Most people don't. And when I say most people, I'm not just talking about the Scrum Masters and the POs. I'm talking about the developers themselves. I'm saying that I have to this day never been in a software team where there wasn't some unnecessary set of rituals, or like some people who just sit and like kind of go through the motions, etc., etc., because leading a team and making efficient decisions and making sure that everybody's engaged and actually, contributing in a meaningful way, and having all that fit together and then planning it out so that all this can be sustained, basically, because it's like a machine, basically. You have to process the stories into something useful for the team, and then the team has to actually pick that up, and then sort of you can go into delivery mode, right? Doing that is a difficult task, and most people that I meet are not up to it. Even the most quote-unquote experienced people don't really know how to do this. So the agile work framework is something that they pick up, just as we picked up waterfall, because it's the flavor of the month way of working, and every single person between here and all the way over to the other side of the world that works in IT will have a different opinion about it, and all of them will have their own practices that they preach. And it's actually gone to it's to the point where you have an entire culture of people that do this as a job, like Scrum Masters as an example, which is hilarious because the work framework itself is actually just there in order for you to be able to deliver work. And then, as I said, this is actually a problem to the point where you need some type of work framework, and everybody reaches for one, because apparently basic leadership and efficient work processes is this difficult. So what I want you to take away from this is that I wouldn't say that teams love agile. I think that this is exactly the same sort of situation as it used to be with waterfall and so forth. It's just nuances of terrible for the average software developer. They don't really give a shit if you do agile or waterfall or so forth. It really comes down to, how do you actually execute this thing? Do you force them to sit in gigantic, super long meetings and plan for months? Or do you force them to have a lot of different preparation meetings and sit in endless conversations about defining stories and all of this sort of stuff? It really comes down to execution. It always comes down to execution. The only thing I ever see which happens organically, even in smaller teams, even when they don't do whatever you want to call agile or whatever, is that there's usually only two things that the software developers pick up from whatever they're doing, right? Which is the Kanban board, or some way of tracking issues or bugs or something like that, so they can remember everything, and a specification for what they're actually supposed to be doing, what is the priority, or what are they supposed to be working on. These are the only two things that they give a shit about usually, and everything in between is down to whoever is in charge, whoever has the strongest opinion, etc., etc. And the reason why most people use agile is not because it's necessarily the best option. It is because the vast majority of people will reach for a standard framework of some sort, and there are so many people, guys, who will sell you you can waste so much money on people who literally just facilitate a stand-up or things like that, or facilitate a meeting here and there. And the reason being, because apparently it is that difficult for even a senior software developer or a senior PO or so forth and so forth to manage the grueling task of preparing a backlog. Have a great day.